on your website, you said
That website
that,
is so outdated. I really need to check in on
but
it.
this is a nice quote. You said that you believe in learning, love, collaboration, work ethic, non-exploitative labor, death, and laughter. And I'm curious, what does it mean to believe in death?
Ooh, okay. This is one of my favorite questions. So
You're
I have
asked
a
it
death.
often.
People often, whenever I say I value death, they're like, the fuck does that mean? I'm like,
Mm,
well, so I have a death tarot card tattoo.
mhm.
And my dad has always been someone that's been very like comfortable with the idea of death. Anytime it was our birthdays or his birthday, he's like, another year closer to death. He's like ready to leave. He's like, as soon as I'm done, you know?
Mhm.
And that's only comfortable for people that are like super religious or really don't believe in anything, right? But for me, hearing that kind of relationship was very like, oh, this is an interesting way to look at it. Like, he doesn't see death as like a negative or a bad or like a scary anything. To him, it just is what it is. It's an inevitability. And so the more I sat with that, and when I had lost my aunt, who I was talked about earlier, who taught me how to read and was basically my mom, I had to really get comfortable with the fact that everybody is going to die.
Mhm.
And that really, like, having someone very close to you die really jars that in you. It's like, oh shit, like, that's a real thing. And so, in a literal sense, it's helped me because, again, when I say that I value death, I understand and not just know I'm going to die, but I believe it. And
Mhm.
so when I believe that, people on their deathbeds talk about all these regrets, talk about all these things they wish they did or tried or wish they weren't afraid of, whatever. For me, I'm like, okay, Khadija, why would I be afraid to just fucking go to karaoke and stand on a bar and sing or
Mhm.
make a YouTube channel? And if it doesn't work out, do something else or become a death doula or do a pole opera show or like all these things. Like, why wouldn't I do as much as I can? Because eventually I am going to die.
Mhm.
It's always somewhere in my brain and it's scary. And sometimes it makes my stomach drop. But
Mhm.
other times I'm like, okay, there's no reason for me to, it helps me feel the fear and do something anyway.
Mhm.
Because the worst thing that could happen is I'm not here at all to do anything.
Mhm.
And so then also in an artistic sense though, I think that if you're a creative person, you have to value death because sometimes I get very attached to certain ideas that I have. And it's like, actually, no, that doesn't serve you if it's not going to work. Sometimes you have to be willing to release something and let it go, let an idea die, let something fall, let it just disappear, let it come to its inevitable conclusion. And then you can make space for something else. Or
Mhm.
relationships even. I sometimes get so attached to relationships in my life, but sometimes that relationship, quote unquote, dies. It's gone. It's not there anymore. It's not the same.
Mhm.
And you can either sit and look at that and go, ah, gosh, I don't have this thing anymore. Or you can go, I had this thing and I appreciated it while I had it. It gives me appreciation, valuing death in all these different ways. And yeah, I just think it's also like nothing really ever dies, but it dissipates and turns into something else. So, you know.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I've always I think my first fear ever was probably death. Like even when I was 5, I didn't believe in hell or anything. I wasn't really
Hmm.
like that. I wasn't ever religious, but just this idea that if like that everything will end and that there's going to be nothing, it always has terrified me, even now. But like it still fascinates me to think of this like that is what nothing could be like. Um,
Yeah. I think
and
about that. Like, what is nothingness or the
mhm,
space? Like, I'm like, we are like the space between no more and not yet. Like when
yeah.
you before you're born, like you have no consciousness, no awareness of it. And then you get
Mhm.
to be here and experience everything and see all the things, and then you aren't anymore. And it's like, what is that? What does that do? There are some religious practices where they believe that like when you die, you're getting reborn again. And so it's just a cyclical thing. And like, the circle, the universe is kind of more like a infinity symbol, like a
Mhm.
circle that's just kind of like bent in the middle or whatever. I like to pull from a lot of different places, like watching documentaries about infinity and all that stuff. But like, yeah, it's I don't know. It's scary,
Yeah,
but
but
that's
like
just because no, go ahead.
even if you're reincarnated, like it's like I'm not gonna know that I'm reincarnated. It doesn't give me comfort because I, at some point, with certainty, will cease to be, and that is just like it's fascinating, but also just terrifies me.
Yeah. Sometimes I try to look at it now, like it's not even like I won't exist anymore, because like literally I won't exist anymore. Yeah, but it's like I did this whole life and now I get to just I got to be here and do a thing and now
Hmm.
I get to leave. I get
Hmm.
to disappear. The only reason things are valuable is because things die. I
Hmm.
have a theory, my idea, right? I always ask people if you could live to be one age forever or if you could live forever, would you? And I wouldn't want to live forever because I'm very worried about the fact that if I did, things would stop meaning stuff. You know, I think about vampires, even TV shows that I watch, right? Where they do whatever, life is whatever. Nothing really matters because if you can live forever, then why would anything have meaning?
Hmm.
You know, I feel like we have existential dread already because so many of us forget that like life is not forever. Like we forget, oh, this isn't going to be a forever thing. But, if you could live forever, like I feel like it would, at least for me, it would philosophically, yeah, I feel like it would make me a very jaded person
Hmm.
or very like, there's no point to any of this. And that could be fun. But after a while, it's like, oh my God, girl, I got to get out of here. This is too, like things have to die for them to have value and meaning.
Hmm.
The threat of that looming over, the threat of things ending, that's what makes people hopefully if they're aware of it appreciate the things that they have because they know that they're not going to have it forever. But if you take it for granted, then and so many of us do.
Yeah. I don't think I would want to live forever, but maybe just a little longer to see the future, or like if I could
That's the
get a
thing.
glimpse
Yeah, I'm
of what's to
interested
come.
in living a bit longer because I'm like, oh, I'm curious, a bit of
Hmm.
FOMO. Like I don't want to miss out on like some of this stuff, but then I'm like, I guess I'm gonna have to miss some of it.
Hmm. Last night I was in my bed thinking about death and terrified and couldn't go to sleep, but I was just like wondering, like, I mean, at the second that we die, the way we process time, maybe it's not the same as like the way we normally experience time, and you just end up in this infinite void because that's the only thing you as can ever be again, like the be in like this void of consciousness. And I was like, wow, that seems even more terrifying than just like
Right? Being like
blanking
a
out.
bodiless consciousness. Oh, girl, please just let me not be anything. I
And
can't keep thinking.
yeah,
Death is peace.
there's a lot of interesting philosophy that works with this idea of like a void or being ontologically as in like
Hmm.
nothing. Because I'm reading this guy named Badu, and it's I don't know if I'll be able to explain it, but he imagines like the world is structured in this everything that is kind of like defined by like the history of oppressive structures. So like our way of understanding everything is basically through the lens of history, which is always going to be perpetuated by a dominant person.
Hmm.
But then he thinks that truth doesn't come out of anything that aligns with that dominant perspective, but that it's actually truth comes out of these moments of the void where things that are like meaningless or like ontologically non-existent or dead are like the actual moments of where we feel truth because it's outside of this dominant paradigm. Um, and I remember you mentioned at some point like talking about Afro pessimism and like this idea of groups of
Consciously
individuals.
had to explain a lot of it to me because I was like, I want to learn about this. And he was like, here we go.
Yes, it's amazing like the way that certain groups, of course, through oppressive histories have been labeled nothing or like ontologically non-human, dead,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
being. But then at the same time, that gives you a radical opportunity to define for yourself or to define as a community or put yourself on a path that may be meaninglessness in a way that is actually very creative or like queerness is
Yeah,
this.
something comes from nothing.
Yeah.
It will. Like it's the thing of that fucking Watchmen, thermodynamic miracles, like the chances.
Hmm.
of human beings even existing. To me, like I'm not religious, but that is an idea that I really like of like, it's wild that we're even here. It is
Yeah.
actually a miracle that any of us
Hmm.
actually, that life, not even just humans, but that life exists
Hmm.
in general, that there's a whole planet of it in all these different iterations. It is actually kind of wild to think about it when we look and there's that Fermi's paradox, which is like, I don't know if you've heard of it before,
The
but like,
alien one.
well, where he looks around and goes, "Where the heck is everybody?" Like that.
Yeah.
And the whole idea technically is that after him, they came up with this Drake's formula, which is
Ah.
like all of these different scientists, coming together and being like, okay, well, this is a formula to say that this is how much life should be out there. And then you have the great filter. But you have this idea, right? That like we're either the first ones that have crossed this filter, which means that we are the first of any beings to go through this difficulty of life actually happening. And so that's why we don't have any other life out there because we're the first ones. Or people have, there have been beings before us, not people, but there have been beings before us. And if you are a planet or if you are a being that is able to alter the atmosphere of your own planet and all these different things like we have been able to, then eventually we'll go through that great filter as well and humanity won't exist.